must remain calm. Must not show how extremely excited I am about this particular video because we're changing it up. We're keeping it fresh and on brand still, but we're going to take a little bit of a different approach here. What do I mean by this? Well, that's a rhetorical question that I'll answer in a little bit. First, as a lawyer, of course, I have to lay a little bit of foundation because I don't want you going into this video really just discombobulated, if people still say that, really confused. Instead, I gotta provide some context. So here it is. So a while back, one of the hosts to a podcast called the Dumpster Fire Project reached out to me through the Law Venture Work With Us page and asked for an interview to where I would basically talk about law and entrepreneurship. So, like a typical lawyer, I did my research. I had never heard of the Dumpster Fire Project. And what I ended up seeing was, this is a podcast that is solely focused on entrepreneurship. I love learning anything and everything I can about entrepreneurship. If I can take little nuggets here from this person, little nuggets there from that person, and apply it into my business, whether it's a law firm or it's a side hustle, I'm all about it. And the fact that the Dumpster Fire Project was bringing in different people from different walks of life so they could talk about their struggles, what they had to overcome, and the successes that they had and how they were able to reach those successes, all of that was super, just honestly, it was educational, but I just loved it from a nerdy standpoint. And so I didn't hesitate to reach back out to say, yeah, let's do this podcast. This is going to be a ton of fun, especially as somebody who really doesn't have a ton of people to talk entrepreneurship with. And so we scheduled a date, we recorded a podcast, and that's what I'm going to show you in this particular video. Excuse me, one quick second. Jarrett, breathe, keep it together, stay calm. And if you couldn't tell by the last 2 minutes of me not taking a single breath, I'm still really excited about this interview you're about to see because we covered so much. For example, we talk about combining entrepreneurship and the law in order to create a successful law firm. And we also cover a little bit of my personal background and the origin story of Law Venture. And maybe most importantly, we talk about the struggles, fears, and failures when pursuing your passion. But before playing the interview that they were so kind to share with me so I could share with you so you could see all the content, I do recommend that you go in the description down below. You click the link in order to check out the Dumpster Fire Project podcast. That way you can see previous episodes and future episodes as well. And it's also pretty cool because they're a relatively new podcast. And I always find that to be pretty awesome, honestly, because it allows you to get in on the ground floor. You have that underground podcast feel. And as you grow, the podcast is growing and you can be that person who's like, yeah, I remember them and I've been a fan longer and I've known them since the very beginning. And then you get to hold that over other people's heads. Or is that just me? Anyways, go check them out. And then once you do check them out, be sure to come back here and watch the interview.
Welcome back to the Dumpster Fire, everybody. I'm Eric Scramlin, joined with Murray, and tonight, our guest. We got a good one for you tonight. I know we say that all the time, but we got a good one for you tonight. Our guest is a lawyer and an entrepreneur. He's the owner of Stone Firm PLLC, and he's also the mastermind behind Law Venture, Content for Lawyers, his YouTube channel. So please join me in welcoming our guest tonight, Jarrett Stone. Jarrett, thanks for joining us on the Dumpster Fire Project.
No, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm actually really, really excited. I've been thinking about this, and what I've realized is that I don't have a lot of entrepreneurial people in my group, so to speak. And so being able to talk out loud about these kinds of topics is going to be super fulfilling. But at the same time, I have to now, I guess, put into words what I've always been thinking internally. And so let's see if I can do that in a way that makes sense.
Right. And you still don't have anybody to talk about entrepreneurial stuff with because Murray and I really still don't know what we're doing yet. So we're just trying to get free advice from you.
Hey, I'm here to serve.
So right from the beginning, it's kind of an interesting story. You know, Murray and I, this podcast is still kind of new. We've brought a lot of people on here that for the most part, one way or another, we kind of knew. I stumbled upon you because I was a fan of your YouTube channel, and I said, I'm going to reach out. And I did, and you got back to me, which was awesome. So why don't we start off by telling our listeners about your YouTube channel and what you do?
So yeah, like you were saying, I'm an attorney, and my, I guess, big overarching theme in life is serving and helping others. And so on one hand, I'm the lawyer that's serving and helping Texans with personal injury cases and class actions. That's Stone Firm PLLC. But as I was a baby lawyer and before going solo and starting my own firm, I was doing a whole bunch of research on Google and YouTube, since, YouTube is owned by Google and the second largest search engine, of, okay, I have all these questions about how to be a better lawyer, how to go solo, all these legal topics. And I realized there weren't a ton of answers and there wasn't a ton of content. And so I decided to go ahead and start basically talking about my experiences and giving the answers to the questions that I once had, because I figured if I had those questions, I'm sure other people would have those questions. But I will confess that I am a big believer in not wasting my own time. So the last thing I wanted to do was, spend a whole bunch of time on YouTube videos and, creating a website and all of that. And it just crickets and nobody hearing anything.
Yeah, like my channel.
Yeah. So I did a little bit of research, and actually I did a lot of bit of research and figured, okay, if the results end up coming back to where there is an audience that is maybe searching something very similar or is needing something that I can offer, then let's just see what happens. And then sure enough, like the research that I did, looking at other YouTube videos, looking at, going through comments on YouTube videos and things like that, the numbers really came out to like, okay, this could benefit some people. And that was the goal. So I just started releasing videos and started getting some momentum from that.
How long have you been doing your channel for? I know I saw some videos that look like they're a couple years old. Yeah.
So probably a couple of years. And it's funny because you obviously have to get started at some point. And I tend to suffer from like analysis paralysis. And I think as a lawyer, that's something that is probably more prevalent because, lawyers, we're a hyper paranoid breed and we want to make sure we do everything correct or we're going to get a malpractice lawsuit. Yeah. And so we want to make sure everything's absolutely perfect. And when it comes to being an entrepreneur, you can't really do that. I remember listening back to a previous episode y'all had, and I think Murray was talking about like a minimal viable product. And that's 100% the truth. Like, you want to put that out there in order to just start getting some momentum, but maybe even more importantly, getting feedback. And so a couple of years ago, I posted videos, and even though the research I was doing was saying, hey, there's an audience out there, I still didn't know if the Google gods, so to speak, would end up pushing my stuff to, that audience. Because at the end of the day, if Google puts me on page 100, nobody's seeing it. And so with some of the earlier videos, I'm looking real rough. I'm just recording. I probably didn't touch my hair for 7-8 days. It was real, I'll say, pandemic lifestyle before the pandemic. And then I would dress up a little bit. Then I decided, no, like I didn't want to do that. It was still kind of figuring out my voice and my style and what was comfortable. And then now looking back, like one of my videos that's popping, especially because law school just started, I'm like, man, I really wish I would have cleaned up a little bit.
Nice. And your YouTube channel is Law Venture, right?
Yeah, so the YouTube channel is Law Venture. So a little bit more specifically, if you're a lawyer out there or if you're a law student, I try and release content from, basically covering every stage when it comes to getting into law school, when it comes to thriving in law school, and also dealing with trial advocacy and going solo. And so, yeah, if you're a lawyer watching this, go ahead, check it out. Just a little shameless plug there. But if you're a non-lawyer / entrepreneur, I think there's some nuggets you can probably take out of that and apply to your business a little bit. Because at the end of the day, Law Venture and having a law firm for me has been a business venture that has required me to maybe step outside the shoes of being a lawyer and put that entrepreneurial hat on, so to speak.
So it sounds like, we call this a dumpster fire project. We joke around like this goes off the rails. It blows up. It's a hot mess. Believe it or not, we actually do some research. We have plenty of conversations before we bring guests on. And you brought up an interesting fact about you've always had a little bit of entrepreneurial inside of you, where you started at a very young age and you were doing something unique that actually almost got you in trouble with your parents. So tell us that backstory.
Yeah. So I'll cut to the chase. I'm pretty sure my parents thought I was a drug dealer in high school because they would go and open up the mailbox to check the mail, and there would be envelopes of cash in there. And this isn't like $20. I'm talking like hundreds or thousands of dollars every week. And so basically what I was doing at that point, if we, I guess, back up all the way to high school, I was a junior, and I started a little filming and editing business for one single football team. And I heard they were interested in having somebody just create a highlight reel for their team. And so I did that my junior year. It went great. Turned out that the head coach of that team ended up the following year becoming the boss of the entire football league with maybe 12 teams. Well, half of those teams, or maybe 7 of those teams, caught wind of my video and editing, and they were like, hey, we need to hire this kid. So they reach out to me, and I sign up 6 or 7 teams. And so as a 17-year-old, I ended up having to quit the varsity basketball team because these teams were paying me hundreds of dollars every Saturday in the fall to go film. And it started becoming like this bidding war to where I would go and try and film with one team, and then another team would say, hey, by the way, we need scouting tape on this other team, 2 cities away. Can you do it? And I'd be like, no, I got to film this. Okay, we'll get a parent to film that. I was like, well, sorry, it's not worth my time. Okay, how about 200, 300, 400? And then they were paying me for basically weekly highlight reels, and that was probably $100 a pop for one tape. And some parents wanted weekly highlight reels, so it was like, okay, here's 60 for this team, here's 60 for that team. And then at the end, it was like the big product of putting all the highlight reels together. And so a lot of cash was coming in. It was a very cash heavy business. I was having to hire friends. And it was, there were definitely some bumps in the road. It was kind of me diving into the deep end. I ended up getting fired by one team. Many years down the road, there's some nights where that just randomly crosses my mind. And I remember that. Where it was the perfect storm. Things didn't go well. You rely on other 17-year-olds to do their job, and it doesn't pan out. But yeah, it was an interesting matter of having to prove to my parents and show them the video footage of no, this is a legitimate job. And then once they started seeing the cash coming in and the verification that I wasn't a drug dealer, they were on board.
Well, Jared, I tell you what, I've been a prosecutor my entire career, and I've heard a lot of stories before, but this is the most elaborate cover-up for a drug dealer that I have ever heard.
Oh, man, when the DEA came kicking down my door, I started getting a little concerned at that point.
No, that's great. Well, how, since, I don't think Murray and I kind of dabbled around, we played in bands and tried to sell CDs. I wouldn't say that I was kind of that level of entrepreneur that you were. But when you went to law school, did you know that you wanted to be a solo practitioner? Did you think you would get a job and then maybe switch? What was your mindset based on your upbringing? So
that's a great question. And I'm going to try and answer it as concise as I can, but there's a lot that went into that. So originally my game plan was to become a prosecutor. And the strategy there was, okay, everyone I know became a prosecutor. I was interning at a DA's office and a county attorney's office, getting exposure to felony cases, getting exposure to misdemeanor cases. In fact, I was the only intern for the misdemeanor court. And so they were giving me trials. And at some point, I was getting so much experience that they would hire new prosecutors, and I was the one that would train them as the intern, as the unpaid intern, mind you.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And so the way I just saw everyone else playing their lives out, I thought, okay, my goal here is to do the 10 years, get my student loans to, go away after 10 years, the forgiveness. And then maybe after 10 years, hopefully during that point, I'm doing felonies, transition into doing civil work and try and make, maybe a little extra money than in compared to what a prosecutor would make in that situation. And then what I realized, or what I ended up doing, was actually talking to basically a school counselor for law school. And in fact, I told her this story I just told you all about, me being a quote drug dealer. And her response was one of those thought-provoking responses, which was, Jarrett, I think you're going to be very frustrated going down that line of work. You seem to have a very entrepreneurial mind. And I don't know if you've thought about the fact that as soon as you start becoming a prosecutor, there's this corporate ladder to where your success is going to be more dependent on your superiors, right? And then what ended up happening in life was kind of the blessing and the curse, which was, I studied for the bar. I get the results. Okay, I passed. Fantastic, good to go. The prosecutor's office, they had a job lined up for me to just like transition super smoothly. And then what ended up happening was a retired judge came out of retirement and wanted an entry-level position as a prosecutor, which this dude has more years of career experience than I have years of life at the time. And so it was a no-brainer for him to take that position. So at that point, it was like, okay, do I just wait for the new job opening? And then what I realized in that moment was I am absolutely dependent on other people in order for me to not only have a job, but to have success. And that scared the heck out of me.
Right.
And so what I realized was that this timeline I had in my mind was so arbitrary and made absolutely no sense, to where it was like, I could just jump straight into civil work to ultimately, go solo now, maybe fail, knock on wood, hopefully that doesn't happen, a couple times, and still be on the faster path than if I were to have gone the original plan. And in all honesty, my rationale from the lawyer's perspective of going and becoming a prosecutor, as you sure know, is you get a ton of trial experience. But what I started realizing was I was already getting a lot of trial experience. I'm obviously doing trial advocacy videos. At some point, the benefit from that was going to be a very diminished return. And I've listened to your other episodes where you kind of talk about burnout. And then I realized, that diminished return is vastly outweighed by the upside of me kind of grinding out, learning, civil litigation, and then taking that and going solo. So that was my thought process there.
Yeah. I mean, really, I think you probably did it the right by you stayed long enough at a prosecutor's office to get that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then before, just like your advisor said, there's the corporate structure to it. There's the politics. And where I practice in New Mexico, there's high turnover. I was chief deputy after 5 years of running the office, and then the stress kicks in. So I think getting out early when you've got the experience and you haven't felt the burnout, and then moving forward is probably the way to do it. It's kind of crazy. Our stories are a little bit similar in that when I graduated law school in Michigan in 2010 during the recession, I could not get a job. I had the similar story with you. I wanted to be a prosecutor. I interned at a prosecutor's office. I'm applying for these jobs. Michigan is just hammered by the recession from 2008. And I'm applying at this small town in northern Michigan where they have like 3 prosecutors. And I'm sitting there to be interviewed, brand new out of law school. And sitting across from me is a guy who was laid off from the Flint office with like 15 years of experience, who's willing to take this job that pays $35,000 a year. I'm like, how am I going to get hired? So I started my own practice because I had to. And it was just starting to take off about a year when I found my way in New Mexico somehow as a prosecutor.
And so I don't want to just focus on the law. And so I do want to tie this into entrepreneurship, because I think, what we're talking about is spot on, which is like, in our minds, we get so set on this schedule that really makes no sense, right? I mean, we get so focused on like this romanticized timeline of events, when in reality, and at least in my situation, it wasn't really romanticized when I really thought about it. In reality, it was me playing it safe. It was like, okay, this is what everybody else is doing, but why can't I do something different? Why can't I, go a little bit of a different path, and then, take the losses on the way, but, learn from them, and then use that to increase the learning curve. In fact, fun fact about me, my first lawsuit that I filed as a lawyer happened to be a very sizable class action case that's still going on. It's a massive one, and it's fighting tooth and nail 4 or 5 years later. And the way I viewed it once I started changing that mindset was, well, I'm new at everything, why not be new at this, right? Why not try and just go after the biggest dog here, and do something that's extremely complicated? Because one way or the other, I'm going to have to learn something. You know, I could have tried to really ease myself into it with like starting with very, very small cases and try to work my way up to that. But why not try and just jump into the deep end and trust myself, and then ultimately, you know, get caught up to speed? And what I ended up realizing at certain points during the litigation or discovery process during that case, you know, I look around, I'm in a deposition, you know, there's 5-6 lawyers across from me. They all have 10, 20 years of experience on me, but we're going toe to toe. And it's just because, you know, the work ethic started catching up to my inexperience. And then there's a balancing of it. I didn't have to wait for that timeline that I had somehow just arbitrarily set on myself.
Yeah. That's really good. I think one thing you touched on there was just diving in the deep end. And I did the same thing. I was mindful, thought through what are my skills? What can I leverage? But for me, being a design engineer, understanding business to a certain extent, I decided to go into software, which I've never done coding, anything like that, never created apps. But for me, it was more of a strategic play. But I also had that internal conversation of, you got to learn, just jump in, just try it. And it touches on another point that you brought up earlier, which I thought was really good, was that loopback process for your videos. I do want to come back to that, but that was something I said. I felt like software was something that I could try. I was going to fail fast and fail often, and I'd learn as much as I could each time I did that, and I'd be able to get to success quicker because of that. So I guess my question to you is, with your YouTube channel, how fast is that loopback process? Because it sounds like you and Eric are kind of somewhat in the same realm. I'm just curious, when you do fail, how fast can you react to that and correct it?
So that's a great question. And I have a follow-up question to the answer I'm about to give y'all. So with Law Venture, there's originally, whenever you start out and you're trying to find an audience, it's a delay, a pretty sizable delay, because if nobody's watching your videos and nobody's going to your website, if there's nobody there to critique anything, then obviously it's going to take some time. So at that point in time, the biggest critic is myself. And at the end of the day, even today, no matter what, the biggest critic is myself. But I'll see criticism on videos actually now more than ever. For example, somebody, actually 2 people in the same day on one of my videos was like, hey, was telling everybody, hey, jump to minute 12:30 of this 30-minute video to get to the actual content, right? And the lawyer in me is like, guys, I have to lay a foundation. I have to establish and set the scene a little bit of what all's going on, when, you know, in reality, what's going on is people are Googling questions that they want answers to, and the answers start at minute 12:30. They don't really, you know, some people don't really care about that. And so whenever I see comments like that, I do internalize them a little bit, figure out what my thoughts are. There's a little bit of a balance that I have to do. And I do the same with clients too, to where if there's a criticism, I have to figure out, okay, is this a valid criticism? And I try and be as objective as I can. But at the same time, if there's a criticism that I think may be coming from more of an issue that is from the person that's making the criticism, then I keep an eye out on that and see if that's a recurring theme with other people, because then that may mean that I'm not being objective and I'm not seeing it appropriately. But if it's a one-time criticism that only pops up that one time, that seems like an outlier, then I don't want to have to change what I'm doing in response to every type of criticism. Because at the end of the day, what I've realized with business, whether it's a law firm or whether it's a side hustle like Law Venture, is that it's business is so counterintuitive. You're trying to find your audience, like, you know, you would with a podcast. And your initial thought whenever you begin a business, at least this was mine, was I want my audience to be as big as possible. I want to, you know, have all these people that are listening. In reality, if you try to appeal to everyone, you can only go so deep. You don't really build that connection. You don't really build a bond to where people are coming back. So what I've realized is what I do in both aspects of my life is I try and find the niche audience And what that ends up doing, it's sparking momentum in order for more people to start funneling in. And so with Law Venture, I solely focus on trial advocacy, and I tried to, incorporate my personality in there as much as possible. Some people will, I like this one comment on a video about hearsay, and I won't bore y'all about hearsay, but he said, like, good video, but would really appreciate not having the goofy moments in there. And I'm like, that's just not my audience. Like, I'm glad you like it, but that person isn't going to be part of the 1,000 fans that I'm looking for, right? Those fans that just love you truly and dearly. I do the same thing with my law practice, to where I don't do, mass marketing like a lot of big lawyers and things like that. In fact, 95% of my business is all referral based. And that requires people to, shout you out. That requires people to think of you whenever other people need a lawyer. So when, your mom needs a lawyer, it's like, oh, hey, Jarrett. In fact, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I got a text message from a previous client when I was working for my original firm that I was working for, not my firm, but somebody else's. And he texted me over the weekend and was like, hey, my mom slipped and fell 30 minutes ago. What do I do? And I was the first call. And, that has to do with, okay, that guy is part of my 1,000 fans when it comes to my law firm. And so the feedback there is you just got to have, in my experience, like multiple tiers, internalize, if it's coming out consistently. It's just so hard whenever you're beginning a new business to have a whole bunch of people comment on one thing, right? It's hard to get that vocal point. So you basically kind of have to feel your way through it through a long period of time and see if anything pops up. And so with that said, that was a huge rant. My question is, because like I said, I'm my biggest critic. How do y'all handle failure? Everyone wants to, go through any type of entrepreneurial venture and succeed, no failures, like, it's a stock that just goes straight up. But are y'all the biggest critics in your own lives? How does that work in y'all's situation?
Go ahead, Murray. You take it first.
Yeah. So, I definitely think we're our biggest critics. But one thing I knew getting into it right away is that you had to be headstrong. There's just training you can do to get yourself into a mentally stable state. I think that's a big miss that a lot of people do when they go into this. You had already mentioned it, that they go into it, no issues, which if you do fail, you think you're the biggest loser in the world. It's not that at all. Like, expect to fail, and expect to fail a lot. There's a famous saying out there, fail forward. So you just
fail your way to success.
Yeah. There's multiple different ways to say it, but you learn from what you're failing at and you keep going. So I made sure that I knew I was going to fail. And it was cool to have podcasts similar to this that I watched saying these other people failed. I remember this podcast when they said, I had one choice. I could either stop there or I can move forward. So those things are in my mind. Every time I hit a wall, I'm like, this is going to be the moment I tell somebody about down the road. I could quit now, or this is the moment where I keep going forward. So I'm good with failing. And to me, I've had enough years experience in my day job, some other experiences as well. Just failure is almost exciting because you've learned from it and you're opening a door to getting one step closer. It's very hard.
Do you lose any sleep though about the failure?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm losing it trying to go through my mind. Where did I fail? Like, I'm doing a root cause. Like, where did I fail? How did I get there? What did I learn from it?
It's that engineering brain going.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
You.
So the gears are always turning for sure. What about you, Eric?
Well, let me start off by saying that I'm extremely terrified right now, but it's also exciting.
It's my presence. It does that to people.
Yes. It's an interesting question. I had to think about it a little bit while Murray was speaking, but I guess to fully answer it, and I don't want to take too long with it, looking at my backstory, it's exactly like you said. As a prosecutor, I played sports my whole life. I was convinced that I should be retiring from Major League Baseball right now. The scouts just didn't see it for some reason. I don't know why. So I was always very competitive, and that's what attracted me to the law and especially trial work. So I was obsessed from the first day I got to the DA's office down here that I was going to be the chief deputy in that office. And very quickly, I did work my way up the ladder much faster than most people my age would have. And then I got, I guess you could kind of say I was passed up for the opportunity. So I went to a different office where they made me chief deputy, and I did it. And it was a lot more stressful than I thought it would be. And I got extremely burnt out, and I quit. And I went to my current job where I thought, okay, this is great. Life's going to be great now and be stress-free. Except I started to get a little bit bored, and there's some areas of the law that I don't really like. So I kind of got pulled back into the things that I missed as a prosecutor, but I didn't really want to go back into that craziness again. So I'm in this weird spot right now where it's like, I don't want to go back to being a prosecutor and being burnout. I want to follow my dreams for once. I don't want to be this romantic idea of running the office that wasn't what I thought it was going to be like at all. I want to do my own thing, be my own boss. But recently married, just bought a house, wife's got to have a new car. How do I quit this job that gives me a nice steady injection of money every 2 weeks to pay for all the things that, we've come accustomed to now, so I can tell my wife, I'm going to quit my job. We're going to make some YouTube videos and we're going to sell some stuff. So right now I'm in this weird spot where I'm extremely terrified about how do I get unstuck? Do I just keep trying to do little things here and there? Do I just go all in? And I don't know. So, I was going to ask you the same thing. I was going to ask you, like you started your solo practice. You're dealing with all these really experienced attorneys, taking on new areas of the law. How do you have time to do law venture?
So I'm a boring individual, like when you boil it down. So, I'll go ahead and say my age here. I'm about to turn 30 in January. And a lot of people, my wife included, who, she's going to kill me for saying this, just turned 30. They don't like it. I joke around and I'm 100% serious. And people who know me know I'm 100% serious. I'm not going to lose an ounce of sleep over it because I'm just getting closer to the lifestyle that I live, which is like a 64-year-old. And so as somebody who, I don't go out and party and things like that. When it comes to free time, it's like, why not make videos that are going to help people and that'll hopefully make them laugh at the same time. And so that's motivating, but at the same time, to kind of, I guess, touch just very briefly on this fear factor, I do want to just kind of put it on the record, just for me personally, that I totally agree, Murray. Like, failure is how you get to where you want to go almost faster than trying to maybe crawl your way successfully to the point. But I will say that in all failures that I have, they hurt. Logically, I know their purpose and the benefit from that, but that doesn't change the feeling of me being a perfectionist and an athlete as well. Like I said, quit varsity basketball to where I still lose sleep over being fired, back when I was 17 years old because, certain things went wrong and whatnot. Those things stick with me. So anybody who's watching or listening right now, if it's a matter of like, you feel like you're taking a failure too hard, and obviously, within reason, I think it's normal. I think it shows that you care. And while I try not to be, I guess, a robot with things, it's also something I have to actively tell myself is like, logically, this is going to take me to where I need to go. And so to, I guess, further elaborate on finding the time for law venture, it's interesting. So that has to do a little bit with the strategy of it. It's a side hustle. Like there's no way, I don't want to over glorify it to where, this is a business that's bringing me money that I can now quit my law firm. In reality, I'm not, don't plan on doing that. But with having a side hustle, I did my research and I figured with this particular niche right now, given the, I'll say, lack of competition, my content is relatively evergreen. And so there's research from a business standpoint that you have to figure out, okay, how much competition is there? Can you rise above the competition quickly? And what is it going to take to stay on top? And in all honesty, with this niche I'm trying to fit in with law venture, There isn't a ton of competition. There aren't a lot of lawyers who are taking time out of their day, out of their legal lives and their practice to try and help other lawyers like this. And so the videos, like you said, videos I posted 2 years ago, I don't know if those showed up in Google or YouTube searches or if you went to the oldest video, but some of my more active videos are my original videos. And, I can pretty much bet that with entrepreneurship, it's a whole lot more competitive. And so, I'm sure y'all's first videos aren't popping number one on YouTube searches. And that's just part of the game, right? That's just understanding the landscape. And by the way, I don't think one way is wrong or right. In reality, is just like one requires a different strategy. And the one that I'm in right now with Law Venture, I'm able to be a little bit more lazy with it, I'll say, because, while I'm trying to grow my law practice, actually the anniversary for my law practice was a couple of weeks ago. And I'm trying to push that forward. With Law Venture, it's, I go to it whenever I can, but I also try and maintain a healthy balance of, physically and mentally. And, I'm married too, and keeping a healthy relationship with the wife and all that. So all of that comes into play. But if it was more competitive, then I would have to take more time away from my legal practice in order to pump out more content in order to rise.
Right. I think one thing that's interesting is I think you might be one of the first people that we've had on here that, like, your solo practice, you're doing what you're passionate about. That's your thing. You love doing it. It's not like you're working for somebody else and stressed out. So your side hustle is truly like, it's a side hustle. I work on this thing on the side. I can do it at my own pace. With Murray and I, it's more of a, we're kind of had enough of our careers. We want to do what we're passionate about. So I think maybe we have a little more anxiety about trying to get it to go faster. And I think what I'm starting to learn, maybe Murray, you too, is especially after listening to you, Jarrett, is I think that's probably a recipe for disaster. If you try to force this stuff and not be patient, it could be bad. And seeing how you talk about it, seeing how your stuff grows, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, sorry, Murray. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Go ahead, Murray.
Come on, Murray, jump in. What do you got?
Yeah, so I agree with that. You push too hard, you're going to end up doing it for the wrong reasons. That's probably the best way I could say it. I've heard a lot of other good speakers say that as well. You lose focus, forget.
Well, what is that like? You get the instant paycheck quick, but then in the long run, you lose out because you went for that instant gratification.
Yeah, not only that, but you might have created a product that competitors can knock off. Like, you almost did a Me Too project. Somehow you found a quick win. Those don't last. They never do. So if you're actually building up a foundation, getting out there, making sure you're putting your own spin on it, it represents you, something you can maintain, something that you're going to be passionate about because you're going to have to put blood, sweat, and tears into it. That will actually get you further in the long run. You're not going to get that quick gratification. You'll get the small wins. That's why everyone talks about definitely celebrate those small wins, because they do mean a lot, especially up front when you're still trying to build something and you haven't quite, quote unquote, made it yet.
So y'all bring up an interesting topic. And Eric, I think on our first phone call, I mentioned this, which was that I want to at some point get into y'all space, basically, right? If I'm starting a law firm, if I'm, trying to grow Law Venture at some point, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know when that point would be. I would love to have something, not a podcast, but maybe like a YouTube spinoff talking about entrepreneurship. And I've delayed it. I've maybe dabbled here and there. If you go to jarrettstone.com, there's a whole bunch of like little tests. It doesn't look super polished like Law Venture. If you go to Jarrett Stone on YouTube, there's, a video here, a video there. Just me testing things. And the internal conflict that I have is I don't know when to get into that space, because I know how competitive it can be, especially for somebody who's kind of doing it solo. Like, y'all make a great team, and by having that type of chemistry, that adds something that's a little bit different than what other people are seeing. But if it's just me talking to a camera for all these videos, I feel like needs to be some fire content, basically, and it's going to require a whole lot more focus than with like law venture videos, which, the goal is to start focusing on it. So the question I've asked myself is, okay, when do I make that transition? And I don't know if I know the answer, but the factors that maybe y'all are considering as well, or, somebody who's listening / watching this, is on one hand, in a perfect world, let's say I just kill it in life and, I'm looking back and say, okay, now I have all this entrepreneurial experience. I can just go ahead and have all these videos that equal a university. Because if I'm being honest, my ultimate goal in life is to basically become a teacher. But not in the traditional sense, but to kind of, share my wisdom and to share the experience that I've gained during those years. Because, I think about it today, right? If we could watch YouTube videos or listen to podcasts with maybe Steve Jobs at the time, or, Elon Musk, all those big shots, it's like, how impactful can that be to the average Joes like us, right? But we don't really get that level of content sometimes. Maybe they are on, Joe Rogan's podcast. You get like an hour, but it's like, we want to see behind the curtain, right? We want to really kind of figure out what they're thinking. And
imagine if Steve Jobs or somebody did a podcast 20 years ago when they were, starting out with something, and you listen to them going through like what we're going through now.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
But as a humble note, I will say I'm not comparing my future self to Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, but the baby version, hopefully, knock on wood. And so, yeah, 100%. And so the dilemma that I have is, if I wait that long, I feel like there's just going to be a natural issue of me losing touch with having the audience, because like you're talking about right there, Eric, to where I'm going to be talking about in the past tense, and there's going to be some type of factor that doesn't really relate to the person that's going through it now. It may still benefit them, but having this like catalog y'all have is going to be super beneficial. But at the same time, the dilemma that I have is, if I were to start, I don't know, tomorrow, then I wouldn't want my content to catch up with my knowledge. And then there are gaps and things like that. I don't know. Have y'all had similar thoughts?
Oh yeah. Yeah. You always wonder if you're good enough. For me, I rarely get to do trial work anymore at my current job. So I'm like, I'm over here doing a training on how to do trial. Like, am I still good enough to do this? And I do kind of worry about that. Like, how am I going to develop? I'm working on a course right now for Section 1983 liability for police officers. And that's, even though I was a prosecutor, that's a different area. It's similar stuff. And I'm like, do I have enough knowledge to market a course for that? And I said, you know what? Damn right I do. I was a prosecutor for 10 years and I can read this stuff. So I think it's the fear thing we talked about sometimes. But you got to put the work in too. Like, if you're not going to put the work in, just like being a lawyer, you know what happens if you show up to court unprepared. It's like literally like you want a nightmare that you're living in, because you're going to get called out.
Exactly. So to bring some things, I guess, full circle. So I was just talking about how I would want to teach, right? I do have this theory. Whether or not it actually happens, I don't know. But I'm placing my bet on the record right now on y'all's podcast that at some point in the future, I think the value of traditional universities is going to really start taking a hit if people, like your big shots, are having their own courses to where you can basically be their understudy to them. Because online courses are blowing up now. Yep. That it's a gift and the curse, because you can get a whole lot of bad online courses, but the cream is at some point going to rise to the top, like YouTube videos, right? But when it comes to, like we were talking about earlier, failing fast and trying to learn from it, one aspect, I can give y'all a concrete example of that. It was with Law Venture. One of the goals was to eventually sell a trial advocacy course. Now, this isn't like an ultimate goal of Law Venture that I have planned, but this is just kind of something to where what I'm trying to do is build a community, build an audience, because I think the real value is in that. And one way to do that is if you can get a whole bunch of people buying a course to where they're watching, 10 plus hours of you, that's a great way to do that. And so after taking somebody else's online course and my own experience, I heard the recommendation: don't create the course, sell it first. And that seemed so backwards to me. I'm like, what? That's not what you're supposed to do. And then I heard the logic of it. The logic of it was, if nobody will buy the idea of the course, the last thing you want to do is spend all the hours building your course. And in the business standpoint, I think that's probably 100% true for any business, right?
Right. Yes.
So I heard of, in that same presentation, of people selling products and advertising on TV, buy this $19.99, just to see if people would buy it, even though they didn't really have it. And so they would just refund everyone their money just as like a test. And so with Law Venture, what was interesting in its earliest stages was that its email subscribers were growing at a faster rate than the YouTube subscribers. And so, and the reason for that, I'll go ahead and, tell you all that, is that you basically, and this is my advice for any lawyers or business entrepreneurs, is you always want to reverse engineer where you're trying to go. Like whenever I hear a potential client on the phone and they're talking about their case, I'm envisioning the closing argument and I'm working my way backwards, right? How can I prove this closing argument? Do I have the facts that I want to present? Same thing with the business. Okay, if I want to sell a course, how can I do that? And it's like, okay, I need to go through these steps. If they find me through YouTube, how do I get them on the email list? Okay, if they're gonna, maybe download a freebie. Okay, what freebie do I need to make that's connected to that? So that's what was happening. And so people would go on YouTube, I'd shout out this free download. That would be super helpful. It's a top 10 cheat sheets for objections and has a breakdown no, not top 10, it's the 21 objections. And so people were downloading that left and right. So, nobody says no to a freebie. And so at some point, I forgot how large the email group got as a whole, the email audience. But I was like, okay, I'm going to pitch this course to them. Let's see how it goes, right? And that's been one of the harder aspects of having an email list, which is like keeping people engaged and things like that, especially if I'm not, if I'm busy with my law firm. But at the same time, you don't want to spam people and then they just get annoyed at you. So I sent it out and I said, hey, I'm going to be releasing a trial advocacy course. Let me know if you want it for free and, let me know X, Y, and Z. And in that situation, I'll select a select number of people and give the course out for free. The way I saw that was, if people wouldn't take this course for free, then either they don't trust me enough and I need to spend more time building up my credibility or my trustworthiness, or I don't have a product. I don't have something to sell business-wise. And in that situation, it was crickets. Like I didn't get any responses. And so I was like, okay, I think this is an authority thing. I think I need to push out more content. And so I was like, okay, I pushed out more content. And then I think the email list doubled, and I can't remember the numbers. I just remember the proportions. Maybe I was at like 500 at this point. And then did the same exact thing, just like, hey, by the way, running it. Because in reality, and for all the Law Venture people watching it, it was like, nobody knows who responded, who didn't. And so at that point, it was like same offer, but bigger audience, and also a little bit more points in the trustworthiness chart with more videos, right? And at that point, I got a whole lot more interest. And I was like, okay, boom, it was a trustworthiness. And then I gave it out for free. But I also had a sales page created at that point in time that was just like, hey, purchase it in advance of releasing at a discount. And I remember at some point, I think it was last fall, I had like 2 purchases, like it was like back to back. And I hadn't had the course yet, right? And I was like, okay, I may be onto something, but that scared the heck out of me, because it was like, oh my goodness, I now have to create something or I have to give these people their money back. It's like, it's one thing to give away something for free, but now people are going to my landing page, they're buying my course because, they're I guess, fans of what I'm putting out on Law Venture. And so that type of fear I used as fuel, to like, okay, let's spend the time doing that. And then I had this interesting dilemma. Well, actually, it wasn't more of a dilemma. It's like, I went solo in September of last year. And then in January, because with any personal injury case, like I'm not really getting paid too much whenever I sign somebody up. I have to wait till the end of their treatment. So there's a delay in getting paid whenever you sign up a case. And so a lot of my clients that I had signed up around September, October, and November were still treating for their injuries and all that. So I had the time, and I was like, okay, I'm diving in. I'm going to create this course, and I'm going to, create all this content, and then, they'll have something. And so I had this set deadline, and then that fear was great motivation. It was very sobering, but the reverse engineering helped prove the validity, not only of that product, but of I think the business overall. So all of that was something, you kind of learn in a moment as you're growing. So it's been an interesting process.
Yeah. So for all the listeners out there, you just nailed it from a marketing standpoint. Rewind, listen to the last 10 minutes. I mean, you stepped through it perfectly. It's something I've been working on doing. I know Eric's been working on getting into that a little bit himself, but that was perfect. So I'm not even going to step on your toes there. So definitely go back and listen to that.
I agree. I think all the advice that Murray and I get, that what you just said right there is puts it perfectly. And I'll tell you this too, Jared. The reason that I found you is when about a year and a half ago is when I decided. For me, burnout was so severe that it just took me a while before I even realized how bad it was. So I was at my new job for probably 6 months to a year before I realized like what it was like to go through the level of burnout that I did. And that's when I started becoming creative again. I said, I want to do something. I literally my side hustle was, here's a Jeep for sale. These things are wildly popular in my town. I bought it out of town for $1,000, took it back here and sold it for $2,000 after I gave it a car wash. I was like, okay, well, I don't want to be a greasy used car salesman. I have a law degree. So I started thinking, what can I use my skills for? And I love teaching. I'm with you. I really see myself, if I weren't practicing law, that's what I want to do. And that's what my side hustle is. It's training law enforcement and prosecutors. So I started looking around and kind of getting into YouTube. And when I looked, I found probably the same thing that you were referring to, that there's most of the stuff that lawyers put on there it's either from like the 90s or it's like a guy in a suit. Hearsay is an out of court statement. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
Yours was the only channel I found that was exactly what I was like, oh, this is kind of what I want to do right here. And it looks, even to this day, it looks so polished and everything compared to mine. So you actually were kind of an inspiration for me when I was first kind of starting out, because I was like, this is something that I want to do. I wanted to be a little more niched in with kind of like prosecutors. But your stuff was that I looked at, I said, that's how you do it. So I've kind of tried to emulate it a little bit. And I was going to ask you too, like for Murray and I, we're not big audio video guys, and a little bit because we recorded music. So the audio I'm good with, but I feel like I have a really hard time polishing up my thumbnails for YouTube and figuring out staying on top of the algorithm. Your stuff looks like any professional channel you'd find out there. How do we do that? Teach us.
Yeah. First off, I'm humbled by the kind words. It's honestly, it's a lot of trial and experience, no pun intended for the lawyer here. But my best recommendation for lawyers and entrepreneurs, I know I keep saying that, but I model this philosophy with my law practice and with Law Venture, is look to other, niches, however you want to pronounce it. Look and see what other people are doing in other, categories, and try and emulate what you like, take the pieces that you like. In fact, my view on my law practice being really dependent on referrals and doing well off of referrals is actually very old school, but very new school at the same time. And by the way, I'm going to eventually answer your question, but here's me laying the foundation. At some point, you may just put a little blurb like, hey, skip to this timestamp. But there's the guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, which is almost a cliche to quote him at this point, because he puts out so much.
We do it all the time on here. He's going to come on. He's coming on the show at some point.
Yeah. I'm honored to be on the same show, apparently. So he has, what is it, the Thank You Economy, or one of those books, which was talking about how social media has turned word of mouth into basically the old school way into the new school, but just with a bigger audience, right? And so whenever I went solo, or before I went solo, like 2 years in advance, whenever I made the mental decision to eventually go solo, I told myself, okay, I'm going to start building an audience now in order to potentially start bringing cases so I can seamlessly transition into having my own business instead of just starting from scratch, right? And so with Instagram, and if y'all are on social media, if you want to give me a follow on Instagram, I'm shameless plug, Jarrett Stone Law, right there. But anyways, so interesting enough, like a lot of my follows recently are coming from lawyers instead of like individuals. And I think
I got to deal with you guys all day in court.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, that's just an example of my philosophy being changed by other people in other worlds and other niches. And so what I recommend for y'all to do is, obviously with me kind of being in the same niche as you with the legal stuff, like model what you want to model after me, take what you don't like out, but also look at other channels and see what they're doing. And in my situation, the go-to was, okay, let's go to these YouTube video tutorials on how to make YouTube videos, right? Yeah. And I would look at these videos and figure out what do I like about it, what don't I like, and then figure out what can I do in my situation. Because a lot of these big channels, like, here's my $6,000 camera and my $8,000 lens. That's just one of the $20,000 worth of lenses that I have. In reality, if you go to my earlier Law Venture videos with the blue screen, not all of them with the blue screen are this situation, but I was filming those, and it may not look like it, I was filming those in my bedroom. In fact, some of my cringeworthiness when I watch the old videos, even though they still get views, the content's great, but you can tell I'm whispering more than I'm presenting in later videos. One, I got more comfortable talking to a camera with nobody there. But two, my wall shared another wall with somebody else's bedroom. And so I didn't want to basically make a stranger mad, because I'd come home from work and then it's like, okay, let's knock out a Law Venture video. Let me talk about hearsay. And some random across, the wall is like, now I know way too much about hearsay at the middle of the night. And so you kind of, that was a learning experience. And I was taking pieces that I liked from other YouTube videos, and I was kind of figuring out, okay, I'm gonna take this aspect of, whenever I film, I want to have a high quality camera and I want to have the blurry background, right? You don't get it now with a laptop, but in my most recent films, a Law Venture, it's like, how do I do that? Okay, I need to have a lens that has a low focal point number. Okay, I'm gonna go buy that. And then like you're probably learning with audio, right? Like, how can I make sure that I'm not spitting on the mic? Okay, I need this filter on the mic.
Gotta have this thing. Gotta have this thing over here. Oh, gotta have this preamp for this. Murray will tell you he's holding out. He is a rebel. He's still got his original microphone. He's got all this equipment in the box. He won't get it out because he wants to hold out with the old school stuff. And I just keep like wasting money on all
just burning it. Yeah. So my recommendation is kind of figure out what fits your practical situation, right? If it's a matter of spaces, if it's a matter of finances, do the most of what you have. Because at the end of the day, like, your content is going to be what, cream rises to the top in that situation. But with Law Venture, like you said, you look at some of the other videos and it literally looks like VHS on YouTube. And so I'm like, I can do better than that, and I'm just going to model based off what these other people are doing. Right. With thumbnails, a lot of it is practice makes perfect. But again, I'm modeling off of other niches, and part of me using other niches has to do with the fact that I don't want to model off people who are in my niche and come off as like a copycat or a poser. And so it's a little bit of like, how can I be different? If everyone's zigging, how can I zag? And some of that inspiration comes from just other channels.
Welcome to the Dumpster Fire Project. I had to mute myself because in the studio here that we have, talk about the bedroom, the dogs decided that they attacked the UPS driver. Maybe we can edit that out.
I love it. I love the authenticity.
Yeah. Well, we'll look back on this someday. Yeah.
Y'all can't hear the gunshots outside that are going on?
Yeah. The storm that is coming through.
Exactly. The storm that's blowing. Exactly. Yeah. My big pet peeve, and I have a video on my Jarrett Stone channel, which I'm not shouting out because there's like 3 videos on it that I've posted, and once every.
Hey, you heard it here first.
Once every 8 years, basically, is I'm making fun of life as a as I don't want to say YouTuber, because I don't feel comfortable saying that. I don't feel like I'm at that point, but as somebody who is on YouTube, to where it's like, okay, you catch a rhythm, you're in it, and then there's like a baby crying in the street. I swear to you, every time I try and make a phone call outside, a leaf blower is within a 30-foot radius every single time. So I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah, it's funny when you sit down to do a video and you don't notice these things until you hit the record button. It's like, was my neighbor's air conditioner that loud usually? Like, what is he built? He's building a shed 10 feet away from my house.
Do y'all want an exclusive right here? I'll give y'all an exclusive on Law Venture, and I'll whatever.
Come on, you got to give us something, Jarrett.
So here it is.
Give us something.
So one of the earlier, I don't think it's the earliest, but it's one of the earlier Law Venture videos. I'm actually like dressed up, but the video's cropped to where it's like you can't see, maybe mid stomach down. And based on my setup being in a bedroom, my AC vent was right above my microphone. So I was afraid of the AC vent just blowing on the microphone the entire time. And I'm living in Texas, and I'm pretty sure I was filming in July. So I'm pretty sure I was just in my boxers. In reality, people are watching this video, it's accruing all these views, and they have no idea that they're watching a dude in their boxers or in his boxers because it was so hot. And then I realized, I can't do this. This isn't going to be sustainable. I'm going to get dehydrated. I'm going to pass out. There's going to be some news blurb about lawyer found passed out in boxers with
18-hour long YouTube video.
Exactly. So I had to run some test runs with the air vent going, and then figured out it's not as bad as I thought.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know how we transition from the boxer story.
I don't know, Murray. This is all you, buddy. Let's see what you got here. Use that engineering mind.
He's like, I'm not wearing pants right now. It's
No, this is
I'm
where
gonna
we
leave that
normally
alone,
go.
Murray.
Yes, we always have to go off the rails once here, so we did it. I was so nervous. You're doing so good. Come on, we haven't found a spot yet.
All right, get us back on, Murray. Come on, get us back on.
Okay, you've mentioned just a ton of valuable information, and you've got a lot of experiences. Out of everything you've done for the listeners, what is the biggest learning lesson or the biggest value that you could offer them?
Okay, so I'll start by saying this. I was initially nervous about doing this podcast and video because, like I said, you don't really talk out loud unless you have a group of entrepreneurs that you're talking to on a daily basis. And the reason why I was nervous is I have to articulate basically my thoughts to myself, which probably aren't the most articulate thoughts. If anything, they're more feelings. And part of the hard thing that I was planning on articulating is the fact that I want to make money, but I don't care about money at the same time, which makes absolutely no sense. I can give you two examples. With me as a lawyer in a law firm, I don't advertise this, but I reduce my attorney's fees a lot. In fact, there are times where somebody's like, I don't know if I should hire a lawyer, and in those situations, I say, hey, look, if I can't get you more than that, it's free of charge, and I get them more than that, and then end up getting paid some amount. But I'm not a money hungry lawyer that's always trying to get money. Same with Law Venture, to where I'm not designing that to be some cash cow by any means. In fact, like I said, I've given the course out for free. There's reduced prices for people to be able to get it at the same time. And so I've been trying to figure out how I can convey to people this kind of contradictory line of thought. And the best way I can do it is, by way of example, which was as a kid, if I ever went to Gaddyland, which is like a Chuck E. Cheese without the creepy characters, to where you have all these games that give you tokens and whatnot, and then you try and get tickets. I always loved the fact of having tokens and playing the games, right? And then the tickets kind of came after the fact, but it was okay, how many games can I play? How many how can I defeat the games and all that, right? If as a kid, it's a real lame day to Gaddyland if you just go play one game for 5 minutes and you're out. And what I've realized is that money can be confusing because money is both, the tokens and the tickets that come as a result. So when I think about trying to get money, if I were to just plainly say that, I think a lot of people are saying, okay, this lawyer is just trying to get the tickets. But in reality, the only reason why I pursue these entrepreneurial ventures and these businesses is because I like playing the games. And obviously not saying that me representing clients is a game by any means, but I like seeing how I can perform what I can do. And whenever you go into any type of business, I think it's all about focusing on your performance and your growth, and looking at money as more as an opportunity to further yourself instead of, trying to find the way to get out and the way to cash out. Because if you're trying to do that, then you may not be going into it for the right reasons. And that may cause you to burn out because you're not, feeling fulfilled. And so that's my one big, me on a soapbox and pedestal a little bit, of a rant.
That's perfect. That's exactly what we talk about on here. And I think when we talked about the fear thing earlier, that's what is giving me anxiety right now. It's like, okay, they're not buying my courses right now. And then I start getting nervous about it. Like, am I charging too much? Am I pushing too hard? Do I need to put out a little more free content to try to build up my brand? So I think what you said is perfect, because I realize, and I think it's good advice for lawyers or anybody in business, is if you're just doing it to try to make money, and you can really see this with attorneys, that you can tell who those attorneys or people in businesses are. And yeah, they might get a little bit up front, but I think in the long run, you develop a bad reputation. And as well, as well as I do, that being a lawyer is one of those professions where all it takes is that one, instance to tarnish your character, and it just sticks with you for your whole career. And if you get that reputation, don't go see him, he just cares about money. Or this guy's getting free content out there, he's got courses, lowers the rates sometimes. that's how you, over a long run, have a sustainable career. And also, it's not just a business thing for a lawyer. And clearly with you, from talking to you, that's just how you feel about practicing law, which more lawyers would practice that way. So I think that's the way to do it for sure. Yeah.
Honestly, to really boil it down, if you can zig while everyone's zagging, and if you can stand out from the stereotypes, then you'll be surprised how fast people start, gravitating towards you and your business.
Yeah. I should also say I'm kind of with you. It's the same way. If I could find out, like, my business right now, if I could make just enough to pay the bills, make sure my wife's not listening here, I would totally do it, but she ain't gonna let me. So
speaking of that, we've actually talked about fear a couple of times on here and how we overcome that. My last question, and I really have to ask this.
Yeah.
How scared were you when you created that video? Because you have one where you cross-examined your wife, right?
Yes. So I have a video where I cross-examined my wife, and that is an example. It's actually, it's a lesson in my Trial.at Academy course that I put out for free on YouTube. And here's the deal. I'm less afraid of examining her, and a whole lot more afraid of her cross-examining me. That's when things get pretty feisty. Fun fact. So we went to law school together. That's where we met. And she was a year behind me in law school. And so I see this cute girl, during her first year, my second year. I'm like, hey, I want to mentor her. And so I was being real strategic with that. I thought I was smooth, but I wasn't smooth at all. I think my pickup line was like, hey, it's really raining, huh? And she's like, yeah, it is. And it's like, okay, nailed it. And so, anyways, I tell her, like, look, I can teach you all of this trial advocacy stuff that I've learned, mock trial, moot court, anything and everything. She just sees me as a guy that she can probably use in order to get all this information for free and all that. Right. So at some point during our relationship, we have a disagreement about whatever. We're two lawyers, and she starts using what I taught her against me, and she's cross-examining me. And it's like, whoa, we need to turn this off. And there's no turning it off. And so it's a little bit more scary. It's like, we're having a cross-examination about me not taking out the trash or something. It's a lose-lose in my situation.
Yeah. Right. You know what? It's crazy. I think we're finding out that we are kind of similar, because my wife's also an attorney. Not to one up you, but this is a small town we live in. When I met her, I was a prosecutor and she was a public defender. Oh my God. What a scandal that was in the legal community.
Man.
And I always tell people, like, I'm the second best lawyer in my house. It's not even close.
Yeah, I'm the third best because we have a puppy, and there's a hierarchy here that is very clear.
They're good. Well, nice. We're coming up to that hour mark. In fact, I think we're over. Let me ask you one last thing, Jarrett. This is the one thing that our podcast is centered around, and the theme is kind of focused on. It's all about following your passion and doing what you love. And if you do what you love and you do what you're passionate about, you're going to be happy. You're going to live a more fulfilling life. You started out kind of young and realized things that I wish I would have realized a little earlier on. What advice or what would you say to our listeners out there about maybe if you've been a lawyer for a long time, you're thinking about going into private practice, but you're scared, or maybe you're thinking about doing whatever that side hustle is, but you're afraid or you don't know what to do. What's your advice on, follow your passion? You're going to fail. There's fear. I mean, whatever. What's your take on that?
So I don't want to be the one that says, hey, just dive in, go ahead and follow your passion, because there's an element of not including the practical effect of that, right? If the reason why I went solo at the time I went solo was I realized that through Instagram and social media and through, creating my own content and all that, I already had cases coming in that would just go to the firm that I was working for. And so me going solo, while that sounds maybe super dangerous and like a huge leap, in reality, I was already bringing cases in. It was just a matter of where was it going to go? Was it going to go to the law firm I was working with, or was I bringing in enough cases at that point to, get what I need? In all honesty, I wasn't making a lot of money at the law firm I was working at. I was a small law firm, but I was getting amazing experience, just like my unpaid internships. And so I don't need a lot. I have very low standards when it comes to cost of living. So it was like I was crunching the numbers. And in fact, on Law Venture, I have the ultimate guide to, and this isn't a plug by any means, but the ultimate guide to starting and going solo and starting a virtual law firm. Because whenever I crunched the numbers, it was like, I only need $2,000 to go solo. And I only need to spend, on average, $125 a month in order to keep operations up and running. Well, if I have these cases that are coming in, I can pay that and I can pay myself and stay alive. And I say stay alive because if I wasn't making money, my wife would have killed me. And my advice is having that huge asterisk, and my in particular, the concrete advice I think you're asking for is to do your research, figure out what's going to work. Because whenever I figured out the numbers and I stopped kind of making the assumptions that, hey, I need to have $100,000 loan, or need to have $100,000 in the bank, or I need to wait X amount of years and have this nest egg to eat into in order to have a successful law firm, or, basically anything like that, I never would have went solo. But after I did the research, I crunched the numbers and I started early by, being able to make that transition smoother. And I worked on that. That's when things came together, because in all honesty, I went solo 2 or 3 weeks before our wedding and honeymoon. My wife was not happy, but the timing of it just worked out to where a really big case came across my phone that was another referral from a family friend. And in that case, I realized, okay, I can get paid a good amount of money super quick. Why wouldn't I go solo? Yeah. And so crunch the numbers, do the research, and the research will kind of be your guiding light.
It's interesting. We usually kind of sort of try to end on that. We've had some people say like, oh, just do it. Who cares? You got to jump right in. Then we've had other people say it's not for everybody. You got to be careful. Some people said, well, I wouldn't do it. Yours is very kind of lawyerly, but also as an entrepreneur, because lawyers are paranoid about everything. I can't start a business on this. I'm going to get sued. But yours is like, okay, look, if you're passionate about it, take the time to do a little bit of research. Don't just go crazy and, dive right in. Make sure that it can work for you. So I think that's probably pretty solid advice to at least think about it, you don't want to get held back, but you got to do the research, right?
And I know we're in overtime, and so I'll keep this super short, and I'll
no
mail you all
rules here.
Yeah, I'll mail you all my billable rate after this. But,
Brett's the only one listening at this point, I think. Anyway, he's our super fan.
my biggest pet peeve that I realized was hearing lawyers being asked the question, "What was law school like?" And it wasn't the pet peeve wasn't the question; it was always the answer that I would hear, and the answer was always like, "It was the worst. It was horrible. It was this terrible experience." In my situation, did law school have its ups and downs? Totally, 100%. But what I've realized is that a lot of people will over embellish the difficulties to help justify the path that they took in order to almost put them on a higher pedestal in that person's light. And so at the end of the day, your research is going to truly be the most objective thing. Ask the mentors that you trust, what their thoughts are. Ask other people in the space that you trust. But at the end of the day, take it with a grain of salt. Trust the research, because sometimes people will over embellish, or they will oversimplify, or they will try and hype themselves up inadvertently like that.
Yeah, that's good advice. I've noticed that too when you ask people about law school. And I can't lie to Murray because he knows when I was in law school and I still had a good time. After first year, though. Not at that first year, though, Murray.
Yeah,
well,
you had a really
Murray,
good time during pre-law.
Oh, yeah, college was, I don't remember that. Well, all right, there you have it. Jarrett, thanks. I really appreciate it. I was nervous when I reached out to you. I kind of looked up to you a little bit for what you're doing on YouTube. Thought you'd make an excellent guest on here, and you certainly did. So we really appreciate it. And one last time, for the super fans still listening, tell us where we can find your YouTube channel, your Instagram, whatever you want to throw out there. Where can people find you at?
Yeah, so if you're a lawyer needing a little bit of guidance, then go check out Law Venture. Or if you just kind of want to see what I'm doing, or if you want to see me kind of goof off on Instagram, then Instagram's the way to go. It's at Jarrett Stone Law. My first name is a little confusing. It's Jarrett. So if you want to really be technical, it's Jarrett to really emphasize those double T's. But yeah, that's probably the best way to find me.
All right, great. Well, Jarrett, thanks a lot. We won't keep you too long. You live in a beautiful area of the country out there. You may have a touch of sun because I still got it up here. So maybe we can still enjoy a little bit of the night. So thanks, everybody. Definitely check out Jarrett's channel, and you know where to find Murray and I. We'll leave it in our description below, or since we're on YouTube now, right, Murray? Absolutely.
Yeah, and you're supposed to tell them to subscribe over there.
Yeah, that's right. Which side? I'm not looking at my camera. I'm still learning this stuff. The subscribe button is below.
It's
Murray,
always,
tell them where to find
wrong.
it.
That's the funny thing. They always point over here. Over here. It's like, you might as well just point everywhere.
We'll figure it out one of these days. All right, Jarrett, thanks a lot. Can't thank you enough, man. Everybody check out Law Venture.
Y'all have a good one.
See you next time. Hang on. Don't turn it off just yet. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider subscribing. We'd love to hear your feedback. Let us know what topics you want to hear us talk about on here. As always, you can find me at tacticalattorney.com. You can find Murray at fullvolumesolutions.com.